This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello and welcome to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm Matt Addison and Michael Plant is with me to talk about Wolves, and a bit more on Wolves as well between two games at Molineux this week. But before we get into it, we would like to thank one of two show sponsors today, NordVPN and their app, which can help you with watching sporting events, TV shows and films which aren't available in your region by switching your virtual location to a country which is showing the event. For example, if you're abroad, you can then access all of your streaming services as you would if you were back home. You can protect your private data like bank details, passwords, and your online identity, and you only need one NordVPN account, which can then be used on up to 10 different devices. For more benefits and more information, you can download NordVPN's app to your device and click the link in the podcast episode description box below. Don't forget to get the best discounts off your NordVPN plan. You can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. That link gives you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Let's get stuck into it then. Michael, the first game of this week didn't go to plan for Liverpool. Hopefully the second one will at Molineux, but it was another late goal conceded, another slow start. It just feels like in fact, Arne Slot said it himself, didn't he? Same old story. That was his words. And yeah, I mean, it is true, isn't it? You can't really put it any other way.
Yeah, and it was a game that had all the hallmarks of so many of the issues that have flared up this season and impacted Liverpool's campaign. I mean, the slow start, the late goal, I think the defensive errors was certainly one, the inability to finish off enough chances. So yeah, there was just so many problems that came back to bite Liverpool once again. And look, I think in some ways they've got a little bit fortunate with how the results have gone this week in midweek. I mean, you could look at it either way with the Villa-Chelsea game, but certainly Man United losing was a huge boost, and Liverpool will hope that means that it's given them a bit of a reprieve. But ultimately, for all as much as we spoke last time, and I do genuinely believe this is a team improving and getting better, there's still these huge issues, these huge glaring issues that Liverpool have not addressed so far. So yeah, it's certainly a concern. I think it was a reminder that there are still these problems that need to be fixed. I think it was another game that reminded us how limited the options that Arne Slot has for his squad, and yeah, that they really need to, I suppose, put in a good performance on Friday to try and alleviate a lot of those concerns.
Yeah, familiar story for Liverpool in terms of the way the game went. Let's do it in sort of chronological order. So let's start with the slow starts to begin with, because that has been a theme of the entire season. I think it's something like 11 out of the 29 Premier League games that they've played where they've scored, and the vast majority they haven't scored in the first half of games so far this season. They don't seem to be able to get themselves in the lead, and then obviously that comes to the problems later in the game when it becomes a little bit more open and teams are able to have stopped Liverpool in the first half. That gives them an opportunity of making it a bit of a coin toss at the end. But I mean, Arne Slot has been asked many, many times in the last few weeks about the slow starts. He spoke earlier today about the approach, and that wasn't something that he's telling these players to do, but whether he's telling them to do it or not, that is what seems to be happening on a regular basis. So, I mean, what have you made of the way that Liverpool have approached games and gone into games, whether it's tactical or not? The reality is that they're not scoring goals early in games, and therefore it can become a little bit chaotic later on.
Yeah, and it goes back right to the start of the season. I mean, I'm thinking Arsenal, Burnley, in the first 3 or 4 matches were games that Liverpool didn't stand their authority enough on. I mean, Arsenal's not the end of the world, I suppose, because, these kind of things can happen against a top team. But, Burnley is certainly a good example. But I think that we've seen this shift, haven't we, after the horrendous run over kind of September, October, November, and then Slot finally stumbled upon a formation and a tactics and a way of playing that meant that Liverpool were more difficult to beat and conceding fewer goals, but it meant they were creating fewer chances. And there's lots of games to jump out that's been the case this season. And I mean, I've said it before that I think if you give them one hand with Liverpool, you take with the other. And I think that they are more difficult to beat. I know we're talking about this after defeat, but the recent records, underlines that they are a difficult team to beat. But it has meant that they create fewer chances in the opening phases of games. And I was really quite surprised actually with Slot's comments. And look, I mean, maybe it's the wording of the question that he didn't like, and listen, it wasn't the only question in the press conference that he took exception to, but I was surprised that he said that the approach is there's no issues with the approach to games, because I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I suspect if you look through the stats and the numbers, there would be no argument that the start to games is simply not good enough in terms of taking control of matches, particularly compared to last season as well, when they were very good actually at stamping their authority on matches, certainly in the period that they kind of wrapped the league up as well. So listen, there are huge concerns with it, yeah, and it's one of many, many problems that the Slot still has to get right. So, and he hasn't found the solution at this stage. But yeah, that's my thoughts. What about yourself, Matt? What do you think?
Yeah, when I heard his response, I think what he was getting at really with the question was that the question was almost aiming it at him rather than at the players. And I think he took exception to that in terms of, well, I'm not telling them to be slow, or I'm not telling Cody Gakpo to cut inside and do the same thing every time, or it was almost a little bit of that. And we have said on this show a few times that I think he's limited to an extent with the players that he has available to him. Obviously, part of that is injuries, and part of that was the strategy last summer. They probably didn't think that Mohamed Salah was going to drop off as much as he has. Maybe the idea, if Isak had come in and hit the ground running and not got an injury, then maybe we would have seen a bit more of Ekitike on the left, and maybe that would have helped Cody Gakpo. But it just feels at the moment like they're doing the same thing in every game, because they don't have any other options. Cody Gakpo and Mohamed Salah in particular have just, they're just not exciting. There's no pace, there's no kind of electricity in that final third. It's all very predictable. It's all very melodic and very much the same. And the longer that goes on in a game, the more then Wolves or whoever it is get into a low block. We know how much that has caused Liverpool a problem this season. We've spoken about that more than enough times. But it just feels like they're lacking a couple of pieces of that puzzle, and that's fundamentally why I have a little bit of sympathy with him still. I still think he should get more out of these players, and I still think there's things that you have to do about it. But I can understand his reasoning. I suppose then the question you would throw back at him, well, is we've seen this for months now, and you've not really done anything differently. So it's all right saying, well, this is the problem and this is the explanation, but it's your job as the coach, isn't it, to find the solution or come up with something else. And so far he hasn't been able to do that.
I'd agree, and the answer, maybe he just picked up on one specific word that he didn't like, but I almost felt his answer to that question was saying, listen, there's no issues with my approach. I'm a very offensive, attacking-minded coach. There's no issue with my approach. But then when you actually look at what's going out in games, and actually they're not playing offensively, and they're not playing front foot football and taking the games to teams. So there's one of two issues: either the message isn't being taken in and isn't being absorbed by the players, or two, the message is being sent and the players aren't actively going against it. And I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle a little bit, and that maybe Slot is sending messages that I don't know that aren't possible for these players, or these players aren't able to replicate what he wants, or he is simply telling a couple of porkies in the presser, which, all managers do, I suppose. But yeah, I just thought it was a really strange answer to come in and say, there's no issue with my approach, because look what's in front of you. It's not good. It's not good enough in the opening phases of games, I think, and I don't think you can dispute that.
Do you think the issue is, when we're talking about breaking these players down, for me, it feels very much like if they had a couple of pacey wide players, that would suddenly make a big difference. They've obviously been without Florian Wirtz the last couple of games, and that hasn't helped as well, but it just feels quite one-dimensional in that final third, which, I'm sure people will be screaming at the screen Rio Ngumoha's name, and we'll talk a bit about him a little bit later on. Obviously, that comes with a separate conversation as well, but it does feel to me like he probably can't just come out and say, well, what do you expect? If I have these tools, this is what is going to happen. But it kind of feels to me like that would be a fair way of putting it. I think at the same time as he needs to find a way, and he needs to do a little bit more in terms of getting results in the here and now, I still do think it's more on the profile of players that he's got rather than the approach, to use the word that was used before.
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting. He admitted the other day in a press conference that he wanted to add more pace in the summer. And obviously he did do that, particularly in Frimpong. Ekitike and Isak are fast players. I mean, Wirtz is no slouch either as well. So he has actually done that. And listen, he's missing Conor Bradley, another player who's very fast. You mentioned Wirtz obviously isn't available. And I think the last couple of games have underlined his importance to Liverpool and what a valuable player he has now become for the Reds. And in terms of, I just think that the other issue that you look at from these games is, well, okay, it's great throwing on Ngumoha, and he is now repeatedly in games bringing attacking contributions from the wide areas. But Arne Slot has 4 wingers in his squad. 2 are performing for him. It's as simple as that. I mean, I am becoming just absolutely staggered at Mohamed Salah's performance levels. And I wrote in the group chat the other day, like, something negative about his performance, and immediately scores. And I mean, typically that was always bound to happen, but I thought he was absolutely abysmal at Molineux the other night. And every time he gets the ball, he gives it away. He can't shrug players off. He can't win individual duels. Yeah, I mean, I think his defensive work rate's a little bit better, but that's the only positive you can say at the moment. So the 2 wingers aren't impressive. And then who's your backup? Well, Federico Chiesa, a player that Slot clearly doesn't trust. And I think at the start of the season, there was a bit of optimism about the way he's playing. I don't think it's been like that for a while now. I don't really think since the turn of the year he's offered a huge amount, Chiesa. So he doesn't have the options in those wide attacking areas. So yeah, listen, there are issues with the makeup of the squad, and we've repeatedly spoken about that this season. And I think that was underlined once again in the Wolves game.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to inject a bit of pace into the attack, you don't bring on Federico Chiesa. I think it's fair to say it just isn't going to make any difference in terms of that. But I asked Virgil van Dijk in the mix zone about the end to games. Obviously, we've mentioned now a couple of times that the slow start is then leading at the end to Liverpool then having to push. I asked him, is it a case of, you just feel like if it's 1-1, you have to go for it, you have to get that win? And he said, well, yeah, with all due respect to Wolves, it's Wolves, we have to beat them. But I mean, it's a coin toss, isn't it? If you get to the 80th minute and it's 1-1 at the start of the season, Van Dijk made the point that it's not just goals conceded by Liverpool. They have had, the Bournemouth game on the first game of the season. They've had so many times this season where they have, at the start, it's gone for them. They've come out with a win. There's been at least as many times now, I think it's 5 in the Premier League, which is a record where it's gone the other way. I mean, you can't sustain that, can you? It's a situation where, okay, yes, Van Dijk's point is correct that it's Wolves away and Liverpool should be winning that game. But the way you win it is not by just flipping a coin and seeing what happens. It's by doing it a little bit earlier on. So, yeah, again, similar to what Arne Slot said, it's an explanation and it's a reason, and you can kind of retrospectively go, well, this is why it's happened. But it's happening so many times now that you've got to find a solution. You can't just keep that carrying on. I don't know what the solution is other than start and play better to begin with, but I don't know, it just feels like they're going around in circles, and it feels like he's not said it explicitly that many times this season, Van Dijk, but we're kind of having a similar conversation after most games at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I haven't covered as many games as you, but the amount of times I've seen Van Dijk in front of me and thought he's saying the same things I've heard him say repeatedly throughout the campaign. But I think that I understand Van Dijk's point that, later on, you've got to go for the win against Wolves. Absolutely, totally agree with it. And you do throw a little bit more risk at it. But you don't have to be that gung-ho to go and get a winner, that you leave yourself exposed at the other end, that you've got players, Chiesa and Ngumoha. I don't even think they were thinking about tracking back Andre to try and stop that shot. They were just already focused on going forward. And you don't have to bring off Ibrahim Konate and put on Federico Chiesa. I think that was the response of a team who are 1 goal down. And actually in Wolves' previous match against Villa, that's exactly what happened. Villa were throwing everything at it to try and get an equaliser, to try and get back into the game, and they conceded a second one. I think that's a totally different position. Than you've actually got something to hold on to. And what's the old adage that if you can't win, make sure you don't lose. And I do think Liverpool could do with remembering that a little bit throughout this season and going forward as well in general for Slot, he's a very attack-minded coach. He wants to make risks. I think we've seen it even in the early games of the season, things like Bournemouth and Newcastle, the first 2 matches. He keeps going and pushing for more goals, and sometimes he has left himself a bit open at the back. I've said for a long time, I think one of the midfielders could do with just dropping 5 yards to create more a bit of a shield. that's not the way Slot wants to play. But I think that you're going to have issues like you had at Molineux the other night when that is your approach.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the 5 games where Liverpool have conceded a stoppage time winning goal for the opposition. I mean, if they'd have just kept a draw, took a point, even though a point individually away at Wolves wouldn't have been a good result, they still would have been criticised. I mean, those 5 extra points at the end of the season, that could be, I mean, it could be the difference between Champions League and, not even Europa League, but Conference League. It's going to be tight, I think, in those positions. Those 5 points could be absolutely huge for Liverpool. But
even 2 or 3, Matt. Even 2 or 3.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I suppose Arne Slot, if he was sat here, would say, well, that's the gamble, isn't it? That you would get those 3 by, instead of losing to Wolves if they'd have gone up and scored. But I don't know. It felt.
I suppose the counterpoint is, have you beaten Forest? If that's your approach, do you get the extra 2 against Forest the other week? I suppose that's the counterpoint. But yeah.
I mean, it's hard to balance these things, and it's hard to see these things individually when the game has gone the way it's gone. I mean, Wolves didn't have a shot until the 78th minute, did they? That's how on top Liverpool were. So in that context, you can kind of understand it to an extent, but to leave yourself that open, I think was, it was a mistake, because that's kind of inviting the pressure and the trouble. But before we move into the second part of the show, let's just take a quick time out to thank the show's second sponsor, which is Saily, an affordable, easy-to-use and sustainable eSIM service that gives you reliable mobile and internet connections from anywhere in the world. You can save money or eliminate roaming fees with affordable eSIM data plans in over 200 destinations, and it will give you a fast and reliable internet connection upon arrival in your destination. You can download Saily in your App Store or by scanning the QR code, which is on screen at the moment. You can use our promo code in the podcast episode description box below, and at checkout you'll get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. For more details, go to saily.com/blood red. Let's move into the second part of the show then. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about Wolves and the approach, and Liverpool will have to answer a few of those questions against the same team on Friday night. In terms of the FA Cup, do you think the importance of this game on Friday has changed at all in the context of what happened on Tuesday? I think it's probably fair to say the bigger game for Wolves was the Cup, because they're pretty much already relegated. There is a slight chance that they might start to pick up a few wins, but I think that's a bit of a stretch. I mean, does Friday change, and is that influenced by what happened on Tuesday, do you think? Or for Liverpool, is it just a complete fresh start?
Well, one of our editors is a Wolves fan, and he very much said that the cup game was the priority, wasn't it? So yeah, probably gives an insight into their thinking. I think that inevitably a league game and a cup game, there's always just a different feel to it, isn't there? The fact that it could go the extra time, the fact that it's a one-off occasion, it does change just the general feel around the match. I think obviously both teams, you suspect, will make a number of changes in terms of personnel. I think we'll come on to Liverpool's in a bit, but I mean, Wolves actually made 4 or 5 changes from the Villa match, didn't they? And you suspect they'll maybe make a similar number again and really go for it. But listen, I think that the game on Tuesday underlined that it would be I go into this game thinking it would not be a complete surprise if Wolves got a result, because if Wolves put out the strongest team, Liverpool make a couple of changes, then you could well see a scenario that Liverpool end up losing again. And I know that's not what Liverpool fans want to hear, but it is. The FA Cup is hugely important for Liverpool's season. It is by far their best opportunity of winning silverware, of winning a trophy. So I think it's certainly one that Slot has to, and I think he will take very seriously.
Yeah, I think he will take it seriously, and I think the team is going to be interesting, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of chatter about Rio Ngumoha coming in. I think that's probably one that I think will happen. But then there's conversation maybe to be had about someone like Federico Chiesa. Yeah. There's possibly half an argument for Trey Naoni coming in. I think probably Curtis Jones will start. It is tricky, isn't it? Because there's 3 games in the space of 7 days. Arne Slot has had to manage his squad, and he doesn't have loads of options. But like you say, the FA Cup is a big priority. It's one where I don't think he can make too many changes. But then if they were to go through and maybe suffer an injury, or were to maybe have a knock-on effect in the game on Tuesday in Galatasaray, then suddenly the context of that changes. But in the here and now, maybe 1 or 2 changes, but I don't think I'd be going any more than that.
Yeah, I think Andy Robertson will come in. That's probably the only one that thing you maybe didn't mention. But other than that, yeah, I agree with what you say. I mean, really, would it be much worse putting Federico Chiesa in at the moment instead of Mohamed Salah? I mean, like he suddenly looks like he needs a break. He looks like he needs a long term break maybe from Liverpool. But yeah, I think that you're probably right. I think Naomi's the interesting one. I think it'd be really interesting to see him. I mean, I've been covering Liverpool for about 15 months now. I still haven't seen a huge amount of him, enough to really form an opinion on him and his capabilities. I don't think there's going to be any youth team players. I mean, I'd be surprised if you see someone like Calvin Ramsey start. I suppose Mamardashvili could potentially start, as he didn't play the last FA Cup game, which I think we were all surprised about. I think maybe that would be the one decision that would really give us the greatest insight into Slot's thinking and how he prioritises this game. And there is a nice little buffer between this game and the first leg in. So yeah, there's certainly an opportunity there if he wanted to make to play a few more of his regulars, he could do. And actually, I did enjoy, by the way, Arne Slot repeatedly referencing the fact that it's 3 games in 7 days. And I did think, yeah, but you've not. 3-4 changes, I suspect, and I suspect we'll see the majority of the regulars still involved.
Yeah, I would have thought that would be the case. I mean, Rio Ngumoha is the one that people will talk about. Is that he's the one that you'd like to see? I thought it was interesting that Steven Gerrard went very big on TNT Sports earlier this week about how he basically said that he made more of an impact in 10 minutes than Gakpo and Salah did, which I think is hard to argue with that. Which for Ngumoha, the conversation I think in a wider sense hasn't changed for me. He's 17. He isn't going to be the saviour, but at the start of this season, if you'd have said, well, he gets 3 or 4 starts this season, the FA Cup would be the time to do that, wouldn't it? So I suppose in that sense, this game is one that you'd expect almost to see him come in for.
Yeah, definitely. Has he ever started a game against Premier League opposition before? I don't think he has he?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
No,
but yeah,
he only started the FA Cup. He only started the FA Cup game last year against Accrington Stanley, and then started the 2. He might start against Palace earlier this year in the Carabao Cup. I think he did. But anyway, but this would be another good step from him and a good test from him, that it's against the Premier League opposition, albeit not in the Premier League. And if you're Slot, you would be saying to Ngumoha, go on, here's your start tonight. Go and prove to me why you should be playing more regularly in this team. And I think we spoke about it last week. There's a huge difference between Ngumoha coming on against tired defenders to make an impact than playing 90 minutes, having to deal with the defensive responsibilities, having to deal with a tactical plan, having to deal with inevitably the kind of the knocks and setbacks that come in a match. No player gets everything right in a match. So yeah, but I think that I agree entirely with what you say. It's becoming difficult to argue now that he is not the winger that's having the biggest impact in this Liverpool squad, and he is, repeatedly now having a bigger impact than Salah and Gakpo. I know Salah scored, but honestly, other than that, I thought he was absolutely woeful. I mean, he really was just amazed just how bad he was. People probably think I'm picking on him or whatever, but I really, really was really surprised by his performance, and I think it's just alarming. No one could ever have believed the drop off from where he was last season to where he is now. Just no one could have foreseen it.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like he doesn't have that yard of pace to beat his man. He was doing a lot of the similar things in terms of his ideas. You could see that he was trying to pick passes, but they were just bouncing off players. There was a couple of touches that just weren't great. There was one, and I think the ball was played up to him on the halfway line, and his first touch went 10 yards back towards Liverpool's goal. It was strange to see that. But I mean, yeah, I definitely bring Rio Ngumoha in for this one. I think if he does well and plays well, that doesn't mean that he's going to start away in the Champions League in Turkey on Tuesday.
And he shouldn't.
That will happen, and that shouldn't have any influence on it. But I think that's the most likely one. The other change as well, to an extent, I think Hugo Ekitike looks like he needs a rest. I think maybe he played Cody Gakpo through the middle. That's probably where he's looked best, really, in the last few games. There's been a couple of things that he's done there, which maybe is giving a bit of an opportunity for him to have a bit of a reset. But Yeah, I mean that's kind of the extent of it, isn't it? There's not really much more you can do apart from that, which kind of sums up a little bit, I think, of where Liverpool's squad is at the moment. There's obviously players out injured, but yeah, there's limitations there for sure.
Do you think Kieran Morrison could start?
I wouldn't have thought a start. I would have thought more likely off the bench, but I mean, you've seen more of him than I have in the flesh recently. Certainly has done really well at under 21 level.
Well, that's actually basically what prompted that question. I just thought, well, under 21s, he's playing well at the moment, and obviously Morrison, he scored 2 at the weekend, was by far the best player on the pitch. But no, I think I probably agree with you, and it's again the same conversation with Ngumoha. It's a huge step up to suddenly go to starting a game. We haven't really even seen him off the bench, Morrison. So yeah, I think unlikely, but perhaps a little cameo off the bench.
He started the Crystal Palace game, I think, didn't he, in the League Cup, or did he come off the best in that one? Either way, he looked like he needed maybe a little bit more time. And to be fair, I mean, that was a few months ago, and he's been exceptional for the 21 since. But yeah, I think of the youngsters, Ngumoha obviously very likely. Trainee, I think, is probably the next one in terms of that. And I think the only one I didn't mention before was probably Joe Gomez comes in for Jeremy Frimpong.
Yes. Yeah.
Managing those minutes. But again, I mean, I definitely would have started Frimpong on Tuesday, but then I didn't think he was particularly good either. I thought he was one that maybe could add a bit of pace and that ability to beat a man, but it didn't really seem to work for him either. So, yeah. A few questions for Friday.
Yeah, Joe Gomez is a good shape. He won't start Frimpong. Frimpong will definitely be rested, haven't come back from that injury, or won't start anyway. And then I think they'll look at him for Galatasaray, won't they? So yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yes, well, hopefully Liverpool can play a little bit better. I mean, even just a bit more entertainment. The first half was absolutely atrocious, and we've not really got too much time to go into it now, but I did want to sort of tap into that conversation about the Premier League, and Fabian Hürzeler I thought was very interesting, and in my opinion at least was pretty spot on really in sort of what he said about not just Arsenal, though I think it has been framed as Arsenal, but it's not Arsenal alone. It's the majority of the Premier League, I think, in terms of so much time being taken for throw-ins and corners and all the grappling. That the Everton-Manchester United game the other week was just ridiculous for the number of players in the box and all of that kind of thing. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on this alone, really, but I mean, what do you make of all of that at the moment? It's almost hard, I think, from a Liverpool perspective to make the case for it right now, because it sounds a little bit like sour grapes and the league isn't set up for Liverpool to do well in. But I mean, some of the games are just absolutely atrocious, aren't they?
This is the least enjoyable Premier League season that I can remember in a long time, maybe ever. I don't know. I really have I find my attention in games slipping as well. That I'm watching it and I'm being drawn to flicking through my phone. And it's just, I don't know. It's the product this season is significantly worse than it was 5 years ago. I don't think there's any dispute in that. And I think there's multiple reasons for that. But in terms of the actual entertainment, look, I think ultimately, not including cheating, outwardly cheating, I think that teams and clubs should always play in the manner that suits them best and is going to enable them to get points and results. And it was always something that I think I was real bugbear, and Pep Guardiola would complain about how an opposition side set up, and you think, well, how can they play open, expansive football against your team? And I do believe that, but I don't know. I think with Arsenal, I think part of the frustration is people look at Arsenal and think, you don't have to do this. You've got this amazing group of players and this fantastic squad. You could just win by being the best football team. And it feels like they're choosing not to. That might be a bit harsh, but I've got really mixed thoughts on it. And I don't think ultimately that Mikel Arteta owes the Premier League a great quality and standard of football. Mikel Arteta's job is to do what's best for Arsenal in that moment. And truthfully, I think Arne Slot probably could have taken a few lessons from that at times this season. But I also at the same time think in the long term, if we keep seeing this year after year, this is really going to damage the reputation and the product in front of us. And yeah, it's just not quite, it's not great at the moment. What do you think on it?
That's exactly what, just to jump off the back of what you say there about the product and the long term of it. That's why I don't think, all of the conversation this week is going to be about that, because of what Hürzeler said. If anyone's not seen those quotes, they are very, very enjoyable to read and look at them. I mean, he says exactly what I would say if I was the Brighton manager, but I think to actually be in that position and say those things, I think was interesting. I think he's had a little bit of beef before with Arteta.
Yeah.
Some of the sort of games between those two managers and those two teams. But I don't think it will last. I don't think this way of playing, at the very least, at the start of next season, there's going to be some sort of directive from the Premier League to the referees to say, we've got to speed the game up. We can't have these stoppages. We can't have all of this nonsense at corners and all of this. It is making the product worse, which, I mean, obviously, as fans or as people watching the game for, whatever capacity you're in, it doesn't matter to me how big the Premier League product is or how much money it makes and things like that. But that ultimately is what will dictate it. And people will only watch this for a certain amount of time. Obviously, if the product gets worse, people switch off from it. Like you say, you're distracted, you're looking at your phone, you're doing other things. They're going to do something about that. They're, at the very least, going to have a directive, if not, some of the rule changes that are being discussed, the countdown on goal kicks and throw-ins and getting people to speed up. It just makes more sense, doesn't it? You can't have a minute to take a long throw-in. And I mean, I would go further. I wouldn't even have this long throw into the box. That's not what the throw-in was for. The corner's the same, taking 2 minutes to set yourself up, then the players have a fight, so the referee has to stop it, and then you go again, and all of this stuff. I mean, it's just a way of getting the ball back in play. That's what it is. It's a restart, and it's become this big thing. So at the moment, it's not great, but I just think the Premier League they're not gonna stand for that. It's not gonna happen for the next 5 or 10 years. You can see already, kids' games across the country, there'll be 5 players stood around the goalkeeper trying to emulate Arsenal and Brentford. And, I'm conscious of not just making this an Arsenal point, because I think, from a Liverpool perspective, it looks like, Arsenal are going to win the league and take the title off Liverpool. It's not from that perspective at all. I think, the Aston Villa-Chelsea game, which I'm sure you will have watched earlier this week, I thought was great entertainment from a neutral, probably not in the second half from a Villa perspective, but it was a great game because there was no time wasting, there was no nonsense, there was no long throws, corners taking ages. It was just a game where it was end to end and two teams playing some proper entertaining football. And ultimately, I think that's what the Premier League want, and they will find a way somehow of getting back to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I actually would argue that there was some kind of gamesmanship from Chelsea last night. I mean, I don't know if you saw the stuff around the centre circle with the ball, and there was lots of pauses in play, and there was lots of a couple of injury breaks as well, which the Villa fans weren't happy about. So, yeah, but and ultimately, which team won? The side who maybe deployed those dark arts a little bit more. So, listen, I agree with you, and the Premier League have put so much work into creating this product that is shared around the world, that is one of the most marketable products, I mean, in the world that you could ever want. And they are going to ensure that stays the case, and they don't want to allow rival leagues to catch up. But it is difficult to know what exactly you say. You can't get on the phone to Mikel Arteta and say, listen, we need you to play some nice attacking football here, because that's just not going to happen. I think obviously referees can play a part in it, but yeah, it's certainly an interesting conversation anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be one for the summer. The World Cup is exactly the same as the Premier League. They're not going to want a product that looks rubbish or that takes ages or people don't like, and ultimately people start turning off or not bothering to tune into certain matches. Then I think that'll be the end of that conversation, really. They will do
not good for us as well. Fewer podcast listens, fewer articles read. So yeah, come on lads, get this sorted.
Get the entertainment back, and ultimately it will happen, I'm sure. And I think when it does, that will help Liverpool. But as I say, that is not the reason at all why we're making this point. But yeah, we'll come back to this, I'm sure, at some point, but we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you for joining me, Michael, and for you guys as well for watching and listening. We'll be back next week with the next Liverpool.com podcast.
You've been listening to the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.